Replacing an old John boat transom is not a difficult process.
Piece of shit. Get out of there. What the?
Okay, it looks worse than it actually is. And replacing a wood transom with more wood is not always the best idea.
What kind of is this?
So in this video, I'll be showing you how to get rid of an old rotten wooden transom and replacing it with a brand new all aluminum transom that will last you the life of your boat. So this is an all aluminum transom that you can get on tbnation.net. These are pre-built, ready to go transoms. All you got to do is measure it out, cut it down to size and slap it in your boat. It's a really simple process that I'm going to show you how to do in this video. Now they sell several different sizes and thicknesses of the pre-built transoms like this. And I'm also going to show you how to pick which one that you need for your particular boat. Now, if you order one of these off the website, when you get it, it's not going to look like this. It's going to be completely sheeted on both sides. I did not weld the back sheet on this one so that I could show you guys what it looks like and you can get a better idea of exactly what you're buying when you get an all aluminum transom. Now, the construction of these transoms is all aluminum tube, just like this. It has a 125 wall thickness, which is 1/8 inch, and all of the joints are completely welded all the way around. Now, depending on which thickness of transom that you order, whether it's 1.5 inches, 1 3/4, or 2 inch thick, that's going to determine the actual width of the tube that they use to make your particular transom. Now, these two center supports right here are a 14 inch on center, which means from the center of this tube to the center of this tube is 14 inches. So you've got a lot of room for outboard mounting if you want to do that. If you're going to bolt on your outboard, this is the standard bolt on size right here. And this will give you a little bit of flexibility. That way, if you're off to one side or another, you'll be okay to do that. And you'll still get your bolts through the upright supports right here. Now, on a transom that you would order off the website, you're going to have another upright support every 7 inches all along this. But this particular John boat that we're going to be installing this in today is only about 36 inches wide at the bottom. So I don't need all this extra space. That's why I didn't weld them in. This is just for demonstration purposes. Now, there's two different styles of transoms that you can purchase. One is going to be your regular transom, like I just showed you, it's rectangular in shape. The other one is going to be for V-hulls. Most V-hulls have a somewhat of a drop in the back of the transom, and every boat manufacturer makes them just a little bit different. Because of that, we don't have a one-size-fits-all, just off-the-shelf thing that we can pull and send you. So if you want to get an aluminum transom for your V-hull, all you need to do is make you a template either out of plastic sheeting like Mylar or something cardboard or really thick poster board, something like that, and send it to us. We can make you a custom transom that's built specifically for your boat. But for most all other John boats, you're going to be just fine ordering the rectangular transom like I just showed you. So let's go over a few tips for measuring your transom before you order so that you can get the right one for your particular boat. And the minimum thickness of transom that we sell is 1.5 inches. This boat does not have an 1.5 inch transom. This boat has a 1 inch, if that, transom, and really it's only just a small piece of plywood in here, so it's probably more like 3/4. If you're in a situation like this boat where your transom isn't even an 1.5 inches, don't worry. That's specifically why I'm making this video. Order that 1.5 inch transom in whatever width that you want. I'll show you how to work around that. Now, if you have a transom that's thickness measures 1.5 inches, 1 3/4, or 2 inches, pick the appropriate one that you need, and then just figure out which length and which height you want. Now, on most of your standard low transom John boats, when I say low transom, I mean 16 to about 18 inches. You're going to want to go with that 12-inch tall transom that we sell on the website. Now, if you're looking at this and you see that this wood is only about 6 1/4 inches, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to show you how to put a 12-inch tall transom in this boat. Now, if you have a tall transom boat, like a 18, 20, 21, 22-inch transom, you're going to want to get the taller one that we sell, even if you have some kind of support right here, because what you're going to do is you're going to wind up removing that support altogether and not even using it. With the aluminum transom being as strong as it is, it doesn't need any extra support brackets or those little Z-bend things that are in some of these boats. You can take all of that out and just put in the aluminum transom and it'll be perfectly fine. Now, when you measure for your transom width, you're going to want to measure from the top inside corner to the other inside corner. And on this particular boat, it's about 48 inches. So I have selected the 60-inch transom for this particular install. I am going to be cutting quite a bit off, and we're going to show you that in the installation portion of this video. The options that are on tbnation.net for transom widths and thicknesses are what we have found fits most all boats. But if you have a odd or custom built boat and you need a custom transom for it, all you need to do is reach out to us through email or phone, and we can get you a quote on a custom transom as well. Step number 1 of the installation process of your new transom, get the old transom out by whatever means necessary. Hopefully your boat manufacturer used stainless hardware. That makes it a lot easier to get this stuff out. But if you've got rusted and corroded hardware and it needs a little persuasion to get out, don't be afraid to grab your metric adjustable hammer and just go to whacking on it. So if you got one of these boats that has a wooden piece on the backside of the transom to give it some extra thickness, sometimes these bolts don't want to come out. What I usually do is grab a thin screwdriver and put it on the inside of the bolt. And you can usually pound them out through that. So after all that fun, we got the old wooden transom out. It was nothing more than a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. And what we're left with is an unpainted surface that has now started to corrode because of the contact with aluminum and water, which all could have been easily avoided had the manufacturer just painted this before they put the transom in. But they didn't, so I got a little bit of corrosion to deal with. The good thing is on this particular boat, it's not bad. It hasn't started pitting yet. So what I can do is just get a wire wheel, clean all this up really good and get the corrosion off. Now, if you get to this point and you see a bunch of pits or really soft spots in the aluminum or holes where it has corroded through, go ahead and stop what you are doing. Don't do anything else. Take it to a professional aluminum welding shop and have them weld you in a new transom skin. It's not a difficult process. Basically, all they'll do is cut down the backside, cut the whole back of the boat off, put a new skin up there, and weld it in. It's a lot easier to put a new skin in without a physical transom in the boat than it is after you've already installed the new transom, because it's going to have to come out anyway. So might as well just stop what you're doing and go get it fixed. But on this particular one, I got lucky. It's not too corroded. I'll grab a stainless steel wire brush and get this cleaned up. Now, this next step is completely optional. If you want to do it, you can. If not, it'll be okay. I personally like to cover up any raw aluminum, especially if there's been any signs of corrosion, with some type of rust stop paint. I just used some cheap Rust-Oleum on this particular transom. Any corrosion that I may have missed, it will help at least somewhat neutralize it. I'm not saying Rust-Oleum is the best paint in the entire world, but just in my experience from doing this a lot, it does help to keep transoms from continuing to corrode if there is corrosion present. The other thing I like to do is go ahead and sand and paint the entire transom area of the boat, because once I get the new aluminum transom in, most of the back end of the boat is going to be covered and it's really hard to get in there and paint. It's not pretty by any means, but at least it's on there and it's dry, so I can go ahead and move on to the next step. If your boat has a vent plate riveted onto the back of it, we're going to go ahead and drill those rivets out and get this vent plate off, because the rivets are protruding onto the inside skin of the transom and they're sticking out about 1/8, maybe 3/16 of an inch. And that's going to prevent me from getting my new aluminum transom to sit all the way up against the skin. So now that I got those rivets out, it looks like this thing's actually stuck on there with like some double-sided tape or something. So I'll go ahead and leave it, but now I can get my transom flush up against that skin. Next up, we're actually going to mock this transom up onto the outside of the back of the boat, hold it in with a couple of clamps, and go ahead and trace our lines where we need to cut this down to size. But before I do that, I want to go ahead and mark the center of my transom. My transom is 60 inches, so I'm going to put a line at 30 inches. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the back of the boat. I'm going to find the center, so we'll put a mark at 25.5. On this particular boat, the drain plug is directly in the center, so I'm just going to check my mark and make sure that my drain plug is pretty close to that mark. On some boats, if it's twisted, it's been hit, it may not be exactly perfectly in the center of the boat, so you want to kind of go in between the two. You just want to find the center up here. That way you have a mark to line up with your transom, and then you'll know how much to cut off of each end. So now I'm just going to hold my transom up here. I am going to line up the two marks. That way I know that it is centered. And I'm going to try to hold this down about where it's going to mount inside the boat. So I'll hold that there, and then I'm just going to take a couple of clamps real quick. Now I can go in here and make some fine adjustments. Get this lined up real good. Now with that clamped into place nice and tight, I can come in here and trace the edge of the boat, and that is going to give me the line that I need to cut. Now right here where this is rounded, I'm going to stop and I'm going to put a mark right there. I'll show you why that's important in just a minute. And same thing on this side. Probably not going to be perfect. We're just trying to get it close. So I got my transom up on my workbench, and this is the outside line that we just got done tracing. What you have to remember is the mark that you made is on the outside of the boat. Before you make this cut, you need to account for the thickness of the side walls of the boat. Most of your cheaper aluminum John boats are going to be 100 gauge or smaller. Generally, what we see is anywhere between 0.75 and 0.90. So what I've got is a scrap piece of 0.90 here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that just to the inside of that line that I made. I'm going to hold that in place, and that's going to give me a pretty close reference point to where I need to cut this. We may have to make some slight adjustments once we get this inside the boat, but this will at least get us pretty close. Now this mark that I made right here, most of these boats that have a rounded gunnel rail like that, it's round all the way through. So what I like to do is just take a square and cut straight down to that mark. That way I can at least go ahead and account for that rounded area that's going to be in there. I may have to go in and actually cut some more of this out so that it'll fit up against that round rail. And then I'm going to do the same exact thing on this side. And make my square mark there. Now to cut this transom, you don't need any kind of fancy metal cutting tools. You can do this with a regular skill saw that has a construction wood blade on it. It will cut through aluminum just fine. Matter of fact, that's what I used for quite a few years building boats before I upgraded to an actual metal cutting saw. It's very important that you clamp this down before you start cutting. That'll keep this thing from shifting once you start cutting through all that material. So giving us a quick test fit, and looks like I am not going to make it all the way past the gunnel rails. So I need to cut just a little bit more off of each side of these. That way I can get on the inside of these gunnels and get this up against the transom skin. So the next thing we're going to do is address this lip that is built into the back transom skin. We're actually going to cut that lip off so that we can get this thicker transom all the way up to the top. Now to do that, we're also going to have to cut into this little corner piece right here, this little triangulated piece. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to put a mark right here where the edge of this new transom is at, and just to the outside of it. That way I know where to notch this at. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to make a mark straight up, and right here we're gonna have to notch all of that out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a saw and I'm just going to cut straight down this top line all the way across so that we can get rid of this little lip right here. So we had a little piece left over here from where that bend was on that top skin. We got to cut it out, and then I got the rest of this over here. I actually just kind of wiggle this back and forth, and sometimes it'll break. If you have one of these little oscillation tools, a regular wood blade on an oscillation tool does great for getting in those little tight spaces. You could also do this with a cutoff wheel if you wanted to, or you get in there with a grinder and just grind this out. Now we can give our transom a test fit, make sure everything clears. So right now our limiting factor to get this transom all the way up to this skin is this corner right here. This triangle piece is welded at a little bit of an upwards angle. So because the transom is square up here and level with this, we're going to need to remove some material from up in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Sharpie, put a mark just to the inside of the triangle, and then we're going to cut at an angle down. We'll cut that off. So the last thing I want to do before I get this thing installed is give it a good sanding. If you're going to be painting this, it's a lot better to sand it now while it's outside of the boat and you can get to everything than it is if you install it and you won't be able to get up into those far corners. So hit it with some 80 grit and then we'll go ahead and get it installed. So that is a much better fitment. That's about as close as we are going to get it. So I'm going to go ahead and just temporarily hold this in place with a few clamps, and we'll get this squeezed in real good here in just a second. For the installation of your transom, there's a bunch of different ways that you can attach this to your boat. None of them are wrong. You just pick the one that works best for you. If you want to bolt this in with stainless steel hardware, you can do that. I'd put some over here on the edge, and I'd put a couple here in the middle. Now, I will caution you, if you're going to bolt this in, if you plan on running an outboard that's going to be bolted, you don't want to put any bolts in that area where the outboard is going to be sitting. In reality, if it were me and I was going to bolt this in, I would put probably 2 on each end. I wouldn't put any bolts in the middle. I would actually get this all finished, put my outboard on there, and then my outboard bolts are actually going to be what squeezes the skin to the new aluminum transom. If you want to take this to a welding shop, or you have a buddy that knows how to weld, you can weld this in. Nothing wrong with that. That's actually a great way to do it. If I wasn't doing an installation video, that's the way that I would install it, because I have an aluminum welder and I would just aluminum spool gun this in and be done with it. The easiest and most common method that we see people using for attaching these transoms is with sealed end rivets. Now, these closed end or sealed end rivets have no hole on the back side of them, so that you can do these down here at the water line and you don't have to worry about any leaks into the boat. Now, up here on the top, I wouldn't sweat it about putting a regular pop rivet in there. It's not going to hurt anything. It's way up above the water line. It's a boat, not a submarine. Your boat probably has another rivet somewhere in it that leaks. No matter how much you try to make it a submarine, it will never be a submarine. You'll be fine with regular pop rivets. But if you want to go the extra mile, you want a little bit of extra security, you can use these sealed end or closed end pop rivets. We sell them on the website. I'm going to be using an aluminum 3/16 rivet to put this one in. So I'll start with my 3/16 drill bit and throw that rivet in there. Make sure I'm giving this a good squeeze, and we're good. Now that I got my rivets in, I can go ahead and remove these clamps, because the rivet is actually holding the entire transom in. Now we need to install our transom cap. This is included with the transom, and it will be sized appropriately for the transom that you're installing. This is just going to fit down on top of the transom just like this, make it a nice pretty cap, and we'll rivet this into place. If you want to measure this, you absolutely can, but the way I do it is I just hold it up here on the back of the boat and make a little quick mark with my eyeball and call it good. When I get the top cap installed, I like to go ahead and put in a couple of rivets. I'm going to be using countersinks, so I'm going to put one here in the middle and then 2 kind of out here on the edge, and then I'll do the same thing on the outside. So with the transom all installed, I gave it a good shake, and I did notice that there's a little bit of flex on this bottom piece right here. And that makes total sense, because I've only got 2 rivets. So what I'm going to do to fix that is I'm going to add a line of rivets all the way across right down here at the bottom. Now with this transom cap installed, it's about 11 inches down to the center of that bottom support brace. So what I'm going to do is come down from the top 11 inches and put me just a mark right there. I'm going to do one in line with where the handle's going to go, put another one over here, and I'll do the same thing over here on this side. But because this boat is older, been used quite a bit, the transom skin is not as straight as the new transom that I put in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get one of these really long C-clamps. You can get these at Harbor Freight. There's quite a few places you can get them from. And I'm going to use this to help me squeeze that transom up close to the transom skin. Make sure that I'm making good contact with it before I put my rivets in. Then I'm just going to go in with another sealed rivet like we did on all these others, and continue the process on down. Now that I've got all the ones done on that side, I'm going to move my clamp over to this side and give it a good squeeze. And you can actually see as I'm pushing this in, that transom skin is pulling into the actual transom itself, giving a nice tight fit. Then I just need to re-drill my holes for my VIN plate or my hull ID plate. The next thing we need to do is reattach our grab handles. I'm going to bolt those in place. For my particular boat that I'm working on today, yours may be different just depending on the thickness of the transom. I'm going to be using a 2.5 inch stainless steel 1/4 bolt. So 2.5 inches long, 1/4 thread size. I'm going to be drilling all the way through this transom, and then we'll bolt on the handles. Now, before I do that, because I've got some old dirt and corrosion and this was never really prepped or painted before the handles were put on from the factory, I'm going to hit this with some 80 grit sandpaper just because I'm going to be painting this boat later and I don't want to have to try to get around the edge of that grab handle, so it's easier just to sand it now. Most important part is to make sure that when you go through, that you're going through at the same angle as your transom. You want to try to keep this thing as square to your transom as possible. I'm going to trade out my 3/16 bit for a 1/4 inch, and that'll get me to my final hole size. Now I can take my bolts, go ahead and put them through the handles. Then I'm going to put on a washer and a lock nut on the inside, and then we'll go ahead and tighten that down. Now we'll just repeat that process on the other side. That's not going anywhere. You have to do that, by the way. You have to grab it and say, yeah, it's not going anywhere, or else it won't work. Trust me. So that covers the basics of installing one of the aluminum transoms from Tiny Boat Nation. If you have questions about putting an aluminum transom in your boat, feel free to email us, message us, or give us a call at either one of our shops.